Hello, everyone. Brett the Comic Novice here with a brand new Miles Morales #1. Should you pick this up? Should you give this a second issue? Why you should be possibly apprehensive about this creative team? Stick around and find out. So, it has to be stated that being a novice in the comic reading hobby, my main source of background knowledge for the character comes from the Sony Into the Spider-Verse movie. Now, as great as that movie is, I will tell you, having read comics for at least about 2 years now, I find that the better source material actually comes from the comics themselves rather than the movies that they are based off of. So with that, I am very intrigued to find out more about Miles Morales. However, my apprehension for wanting to start this series basically comes from not this book, but from The Amazing Spider-Man starting at number 75. Now, I started picking this up because I had heard that this was kind of a good jumping on point because Peter Parker was taking a backseat to Ben Reilly. I had no idea who Ben Reilly is, and I felt as though that this was a good chance for me to find out. Now, one thing that I did notice as I was reading this story, that there was a rotating cast of writers taking over The Amazing Spider-Man from 75 all the way to its conclusion to, I believe, 93. Now, although I have every single one of those comics, I will tell you the main story was the ones written by Zeb Wells, who is now currently writing the main Amazing Spider-Man series. One of the things that I noticed as I was reading The Amazing Spider-Man from 75 to 93 was one of the less than stellar stories, or whenever I picked up a book featuring or written by Cody Ziglar, those stories were less than stellar. And when it comes to the Miles Morales Spider-Man, that is the main writer for this issue #1 and probably this ongoing series. So the question is this #1 issue any good, or is it less than stellar similarly to The Amazing Spider-Man from 75 to 93? I'm going to take this and find out and give you my thoughts on those. All right, so talking about Miles Morales #1, I will tell you there's some good things about this and some bad things about this. The first thing was, as I thought that there was some really good paper quality. As I was flipping through this, the paper seemed thicker. There was more like denseness to it. And then after getting into a couple of pages, it went back to the very thin, marvelly stuff that I've been used to. Not super thin to where the ink will come off on your fingers, but I was kind of, went from being impressed to a little less impressed. The neat thing about this story was just the energy within many of the screen captions. It does start off slow, and then it gets into a slow point halfway through the story, but I think it kind of builds, and it needs those slow points in order to move it to the end of the issue to preview and set up the second issue. It starts off with discussing kind of like where Peter Parker is, what's going on. And I think from what I recall from seeing some of the Miles Morales, the last series that was being done, I believe there was a clone series. It brought up clone series. It brought up Peter being a jerk. So it's kind of aware of what's going on in certain continuities. I like that I don't feel as though I had to know certain things, that it did spell out some of the Miles Morales world that I'm unfamiliar with, it being in, I believe, the 616 or the standard Amazing Spider-Man universe. The Scorpion is discussing and sharing with Miles Morales, he'd take on the other Spider-Man, but you'll do instead. The action scenes, the momentum, the physicality, I find very intriguing, very interesting, very compelling. It slows down after a while because he gets busted in some extent by his private school teacher for being late once again, and also for his inability to at least say what happened. He went away for a little while and came back with a black eye. So there's that. And one thing I did like about the voice, and again, I'm not sure if this is consistent with Miles Morales, but there is a lot of hope. To me, from what I read of it, there is some hope and some learning curve. He has a support structure at home. I didn't know that his parents knew about that he was a Spider-Man, but they're talking with him, they're supporting him. It's almost like at least the CW's Flash series. He has, Barry Allen's Flash on that has a supporting cast to help him. His parents are aware of his secret identity, his dual responsibilities, and they're there. And I think that makes this character a little bit more compelling and interesting. Because again, there's that whole, well, what should you tell the people that you are closest to your secret identity? Does it put them in danger? And I do think it's kind of interesting. I didn't know, like, this character right here, this B character, I'm not sure if they were friends or enemies or frenemies or whatever. Miles Morales takes care of him quite well. Again, the physicality within the fight. And then at the very end of the book, it sets up a perhaps villain for the next series, because we have this Rahim, I believe, I probably butchered it. It'll be on the screen. But you have this character that was introduced at the very opening during Miles Morales's journal entry. And then from that point forward, we conclude with this, and we get the setup that she knows Miles Morales's or this Spider-Man's name. So it's quite interesting to see what is going to happen. I will tell you, again, just with Fantastic Four #1, this issue #1 is really good. I would give it a solid 7.5. I am looking forward to the next issue. I think there's some really good, compelling storytelling in here, and I don't feel as though I'm in the dark with this #1 with the character of Miles Morales. So yeah, that in mind, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing or liking or whatever. And I do appreciate it. I appreciate all feedback. Please give it to me, comicnovice@gmail.com, or some of the comments down below. Thank you. And until next video, I will see you in the dollar bin.